The letter was thin, flimsy. It looked harmless enough. Just another piece of junk mail, probably a credit card offer I did not need. I tossed it onto the kitchen counter, planning to sort it later. My morning routine was sacred. Coffee, then the newspaper, then maybe a quick check of emails before heading to the office. It was a Tuesday, a regular Tuesday, the kind where nothing important ever happens. I was wrong. Hours later, the letter was still there, sitting like a silent accusation. I finally picked it up, intending to throw it straight into the recycling. But something about the return address caught my eye. It was from a bank. Not my bank, but one I recognized. A big national chain. That was odd. I never dealt with them. Curiosity, that small, annoying voice, urged me to open it. I ripped open the envelope. The first line hit me like a physical blow. Notice of default. Loan account number XXX. My breath caught in my throat. Loan account, default, what in the world was this? My eyes scanned the page, trying to make sense of the legal jargon, the numbers, the dates. And then I saw it. My name, printed clearly at the top as the primary borrower, Alex Miller. My address. My supposed signature at the bottom of the loan agreement referenced. My blood ran cold. This was impossible. I had never taken out a loan from this bank. I had no idea what this was about. My mind reeled. Was this some kind of scam? Identity theft? I felt a tremor of fear, a deep, unsettling fear. The amount listed was staggering, $150,000. For what? And when? The date on the document was just over a year ago. A year ago. Where had I been a year ago? Living my life working. Completely unaware that a massive debt was supposedly being piled onto my name. My hands started to shake. I reread the letter, searching for any detail I might have missed. The loan was for personal use. There was an interest rate, payment schedule, and then the stark notice that several payments had been missed, leading to this default. This was real, this was happening. My first thought, irrational as it was Sarah. Sarah. My ex-girlfriend. We had broken up 6 months ago, after 4 years together. It had been messy, but I thought we were past the bitterness. We were together a year ago. We lived in this house. She knew my finances, my accounts. But to take out a loan in my name, without my knowledge, it felt too dark, too malicious. But the thought, once planted, refused to leave. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table. The letter crumpled in my trembling hand. My mind was racing, trying to connect dots that refused to align. Who would do this? Who would commit such a massive fraud? And why my name? It had to be someone who had access to my personal information, someone I trusted. Then another thought, equally disturbing, surfaced. Mark Peterson. My golf buddy. He was the manager at the local branch of that very bank. The same bank that had sent me this notice. Mark. We played golf every Saturday. We talked about everything, or so I thought. He was practically family. Could he have had anything to do with this? No, that was even crazier. Mark was a good guy, a stand-up guy. He wouldn't be involved in something like this. He couldn't. The room felt cold, even though the sun was streaming through the window. Pleasant morning had shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over Sarah's name in my contacts. My thumb paused. What would I even say? Did you take out a $150,000 loan in my name? It sounded insane. She would deny it, of course. She would laugh, call me paranoid. But the seed of doubt, of suspicion had taken root. I looked at the crumpled letter again, the signature. It was a decent forgery. Close enough to pass a quick glance, but distinct enough if you knew my actual signature well. Who knew my signature that well, Sarah? She had seen me sign countless documents. She had even signed for packages on my behalf before. She knew how my hand moved. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about money. This was about a complete and utter violation of trust. It was about someone I cared for, someone I loved, potentially destroying my life, my financial future, all behind my back. The thought was sickening. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. The world suddenly felt like a dangerous place, filled with hidden threats from the people closest to you. I needed to understand. I needed answers, and I knew, deep down, that those answers were going to be ugly. This regular Tuesday had become the day my life imploded. My phone felt like a brick in my hand. I stared at Sarah's contact for what felt like an eternity. My anger was a hot, pulsating thing in my chest, battling with a cold, desperate fear. I wanted to call her, to scream, to demand answers. But then what? She'd deny it. She'd cry. She'd manipulate. I knew her patterns. I knew her too well, clearly not well enough in some ways, but well enough to predict her initial response. I needed to be smart. I needed proof. Something more than just this notice. I needed to see the actual loan document, the one with the supposed forged signature. I remembered the bank's name on the letter, picked up the phone, my fingers still shaking, and called their general customer service line. It was a maze of automated menus, frustratingly slow. When I finally reached a human, a cheerful woman named Brenda, I tried to keep my voice steady. I received a default notice for a loan I never took out. I explained, forcing calm into my voice. My name is Alex Miller. I need information. I need to see the original loan documents. Brenda was polite but unhelpful. I can't disclose specific account details over the phone, sir, for security reasons. You'll need to come into a branch with identification. Of course, standard procedure. But a wave of panic washed over me. Going to a branch felt too real. It meant acknowledging this nightmare was truly happening. I decided to go to the branch Mark managed. It was the closest, and maybe, just maybe, he could somehow help. It felt like a long shot, but I was desperate. I drove there in a daze, the traffic a blur around me. My mind was still reeling, replaying memories of Sarah, of our life together. Had she been planning this for months? Had she been living a secret life right under my nose? Every shared laugh, every intimate moment now felt tainted. I walked into the bank. The familiar decor, now looking foreign, menacing. Mick's office was in the back, visible through a glass wall. He was on the phone, laughing, looking relaxed. A normal day for him. For me, the world had tilted off its axis. I approached the reception desk. I need to speak to Mark Peterson, please. It's Alex Miller. The receptionist smiled. He's just finishing up a call. Please have a seat. I sat in an uncomfortable chair, trying to compose myself. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if it wasn't Sarah? What if I was wrong? The hope was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by sickening certainty. Finally, Mark emerged from his office. His smile was genuine when he saw me. Alex, hey man, what are you doing here? Not applying for a loan, I hope. You know my rates are the best. He chuckled, completely unaware of the bomb I was about to drop. He led me into his office, closing the door. So, what can I do for you, buddy? He asked, leaning back in his chair. I didn't waste any time. I pulled the default notice from my pocket and laid it on his desk. Mark, I got this today. He picked it up, his brow furrowing as he read it. His smile slowly faded, replaced by a look of confusion and concern. Default notice. For Alex Miller. Wait, is this for you? Yes, Mark. And I have no idea what it is. I never took out this loan. I've never even been a customer of this bank. Mark's face went pale. He reread the notice, his eyes darting to the loan amount. $150,000? Alex, this has to be a mistake or identity theft. That's what I thought at first, I said, my voice tight. But then I started thinking. And I realized, Chith here is only one person who would have all my information, who could forge my signature well enough, and who might be desperate enough to do something like this. I watched his face as I said the name, Sarah. Mark flinched. His eyes widened slightly, then he looked away, towards the window, his jaw tightening. The color drained from his face completely. He didn't deny it. He didn't protest. He just sat there silent, his gaze fixed on some distant point. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. It was louder than any confession. Mike knew. He knew? Or at least he suspected it was true, and he wasn't shocked by the possibility. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined, not just from Sarah, but now, a chilling realization about my friend. Mark? I prompted, my voice barely a whisper. He finally turned back to me, his eyes full of a pained, haunted look. Alex, I can't talk about client information. It was a weak defense, a boilerplate statement that didn't fit the situation. Mark, this is my name on a fraudulent loan. This is my life. What do you know? I pressed, my voice rising slightly. He ran a hand through his hair, looking utterly distraught. Look, Alex, Sarah came to me. She was in a bad place. She said, it was for a business venture, a surprise for you. She said you were busy out of town, and she couldn't reach you, but the deal was time sensitive. She said you'd given her permission to sign on your behalf for urgent matters. I know it sounds crazy now. But she was so convincing. She was crying. She showed me a power of attorney document. I should have checked it more thoroughly. I should have called you. But she swore it was legitimate, that you knew, that it was all part of a plan for your future together. My world spun. A power of attorney? A surprise for me? A business venture? The lies piled on top of each other, forming a mountain of deceit. And Mark, my friend, my golf buddy, he had just let it happen. He facilitated it. He had helped her. She forged my signature, Mark. And she showed you a fake power of attorney document. And you just approved a $150,000 loan based on that. My voice was tight with disbelief and a crushing sense of betrayal. The anger returned, hotter and more intense than before. This wasn't just Sarah's fault. Mark had played a part too. A massive, devastating part. The golf buddy, the friend, had effectively signed away my financial future. This was far worse than I had ever imagined. The air in Mark's office was thick with unspoken accusations. I stared at him, my disbelief turning into a cold, hard anger. He sat across from me, slumped in his chair, looking utterly defeated. His confession, however partial, had ripped open a new wound. It wasn't just Sarah. It was Mark. My friend, my golf buddy, the person I had trusted with conversations about my life, my future. He had betrayed me too, in a way that felt almost as devastating as Sarah's action. Mark, I said, my voice barely a whisper, how could you believe her without calling me? Without checking with me? He finally met my gaze, his eyes full of anguish. Alex, I know. Believe me, I've asked myself that question every single day since she came in. It was a lapse in judgment. A huge one. The biggest mistake of my professional life, probably my life period. He leaned forward, elbows on his desk, his voice hushed. She came in here looking like a wreck. Said you guys were having issues, that you were distant, but that she was trying to do something special for your future. A real estate investment, she called it. She talked about how you always wanted to get into property, how this was the perfect opportunity. She had documents, forged documents, showing projected returns, a partnership agreement with some shell company she made up. My head pounded. Real estate investment. She had played on my known aspirations, my dreams, twisted them into a deceitful narrative. It was calculated, cruel, and the power of attorney. I pressed, my voice flat. Mark sighed, a long, ragged sound. It looked convincing. High-quality paper, a notary stamp, everything. She even had a story about the notary being a family friend in a hurry. I know, Alex. I know it's no excuse. I was busy, distracted. We had a new quota push that week. I was under pressure. And Sarah, she was so convincing. She played on my sympathy. She even mentioned our golf games, talked about how close we all were. She made it sound like this was a secret surprise for you, and if I called you, I'd ruin it. He closed his eyes. I didn't think she'd ever do something like this to you. To either of us. I figured she was maybe a little over her head with this surprise, but that you'd eventually smooth it over. So you just rubber-stamped a $150,000 loan based on a fake document and a sob story? I asked, the words laced with bitterness. You put my entire financial future at risk because she was convincing. And you were distracted. Mark flinched. I messed up, Alex, royally. I should have protected you. I should have known better. I am so sorry. I truly am. I am probably going to lose my job over this. If the bank finds out I greenlit a fraudulent loan based on a fake POA, especially one where the borrower is a personal friend, I am toast. My career is over. A strange, complex wave of emotion washed over me. But my pity was quickly overshadowed by the enormous weight of my own situation. My career, my future, my reputation, all of it was on the line too. What about the money, Mark? Where did it go? I demanded. He shook his head slowly. I don't know, Alex. It was wired out the same day. To an account in her name or the name of that shell company she mentioned. It wasn't invested in anything legitimate, that's for sure. The real estate venture was obviously a lie. We haven't seen a penny back. And now you've got this default notice. My mind raced. This was bigger than I thought. Not just a forged loan, but an elaborate scheme involving fake documents and a complete fabrication of a business venture. Sarah wasn't just desperate. She was a criminal mastermind in her own twisted way. So what happens now? I asked, my voice flat. Do I report this to the police? Do I tell the bank everything? If I do, what happens to you? Mark looked desperate. Alex, please. Don't go to the police yet. Don't go to corporate. Give me a chance. I can try to fix this. I can try to quietly get the bank to absorb the loss, maybe. Or at least put it on Sarah. If it comes out that I approved a fraudulent loan, I am done. My wife, my kids, Alex, you know my family. I can't lose everything. He was pleading. My friend, my golf buddy, was begging me to protect him from the consequences of his own colossal mistake. It was an impossible position. On one hand, I understood his fear. On the other, his mistake had put me in this impossible position. You want me to cover for you, Mark? I asked, my voice rising. After you let my ex-girlfriend sign a $150,000 loan in my name, based on lies and fake documents, putting my entire financial stability at risk. No, not cover for me, he stammered, running a hand through his thinning hair. Just give me a little time. Let me see what I can do from the inside. I have contacts. Maybe here is a way to shift the liability, to prove it was all Sarah without implicating me directly in the approval process. I'll help you in any way I can, Alex. I swear, I'll even contribute financially if that's what it takes. His offer to contribute financially was a sign of his desperation, but also an admission of guilt. It didn't erase the fact that he had essentially signed away a massive chunk of my future. The betrayal cut deep, like a knife twisted slowly. Sarah's actions were malicious, but Mark's were an inexcusable breach of trust. A shocking display of professional negligence and personal cowardice. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I couldn't sit there anymore. My head was pounding. The golf course, the casual Saturdays, the friendly rivalry, all of it felt like a distant, cruel memory. My golf buddy had become an accomplice in my financial ruin. The heartbreak was immense, a heavy weight in my chest. I left Mark in his office, his desperate pleas echoing in my ears, knowing that my next step had to be to a lawyer, regardless of the consequences for him. My life, my future, depended on it. I drove away from the bank in a haze, the conversation with Mark replaying over and over in my head. His pleading, his excuses, his desperate offer to fix it. It was all so pathetic, so infuriating. The image of him slumped in his chair was almost enough to make me pity him, almost. But then the reality of the default notice, the enormous debt, and the sheer audacity of Sarah's betrayal slammed back into me. My own life was a wreckage, and he expected me to protect him? Not anymore. My first call, after taking a few deep breaths to try and clear my head, was to my old college roommate, David. David was a lawyer, specializing in financial fraud and corporate litigation. We hadn't talked much in years, but I knew he was sharp, meticulous, and wouldn't sugarcoat anything. He was the kind of person I needed right now. Dave, it's Alex. I need your help. I am in a lot of trouble. I explained everything, leaving out no detail. The forged loan, Sarah's deceit, Mark's involvement. As I spoke, my voice occasionally cracked, the emotion of it all overwhelming me. David listened patiently, asking a few pointed questions, his voice calm and professional. Alex, this is serious, he said when I finished. This isn't just about a debt. This is fraud, potentially grand theft. And your friend Mark, his actions could make him complicit, or, at the very least, liable for gross negligence that contributed to the fraud. So what do? I asked, my heart sinking even further. First, you absolutely do not acknowledge this debt. Do not make any payments. Do not engage with any debt collectors. Your position is that you never authorized this loan. Period. Your signature was forged, and the power of attorney was a fabrication. And Sarah? I asked, dreading the answer. She's looking at criminal charges, Alex. Fraud, forgery, possibly more. The bank will want to recoup their money, and they'll likely go after her, especially if you prove it wasn't you. But if you don't press charges, or at least cooperate with the investigation, here is a risk they might try to hold you responsible, arguing you were somehow complicit or negligent in letting this happen. The words criminal charges hung in the air. Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I had loved, shared my life with. The thought of her in court, potentially going to jail, was a gut punch. Even after everything, there was a part of me that recoiled from the idea of completely destroying her life. But then I remembered the betrayal, the callous disregard for my well-being, the calculated lies. My future was on the line. "What about Mark?" I asked. "He's terrified of losing his job, of facing charges." David was blunt. "Mark made a colossal error in judgment, Alex. As a bank manager, he has a fiduciary duty. Approving a loan of that size without proper verification, especially with a power of attorney that he admits he didn't fully vet, is a huge liability for him and the bank. If you tell the full truth, which you must, then his involvement will come out. The bank will investigate him. He'll likely lose his job, and depending on the bank's internal policies and how much they want to protect their reputation, they might even pursue charges against him for negligence or complicity. But Alex, that's not your problem. Your problem is clearing your name and removing this debt." His words were harsh but necessary. I knew he was right. My priority had to be myself. "So, what's step one?" I asked, feeling a tiny spark of resolve amidst the despair. "Step one is to formally dispute this debt with the bank, in writing asserting fraud and forgery. We need to demand copies of all original loan documents, including the application, the power of attorney, and any notes or communications related to the approval. We'll also need to file a police report for identity theft and fraud." A police report. That made it even more real. Once the police were involved, there was no turning back. It would become a public matter, an official investigation. Sarah would be formally accused. "Alex, I know this is hard," David said, his voice softening slightly. "But you have to think about yourself. This isn't just a minor mistake. This is a deliberate, calculated act that could ruin your credit, your ability to get a mortgage, even your future employment prospects. You can't let her get away with this, and you can't protect Mark at your own expense. Justice needs to be served for you." He was right. I knew it. But the emotional toll was immense. It felt like I was betraying people I cared about, even though they had betrayed me first. The golf buddy, the ex-girlfriend, the comfortable, predictable life I thought I had, all of it was crumbling. I spent the next hour on the phone with David, detailing everything I could remember about Sarah's financial habits, her past struggles, any suspicious behavior. He told me to gather any old shared documents, bank statements, anything that might have her signature or give insight into her finances. He said he would draft the formal dispute letter and the police report. As I hung up, a profound weariness settled over me. The battle was just beginning. It wouldn't be easy. It would be emotionally draining, financially costly in legal fees, and would force me to confront the painful reality of Sarah's deceit and Mark's shocking negligence. But there was no other choice. My life depended on fighting this. The heartbreaking realization was that, to save myself, I would likely have to destroy the lives of 2 people I once cared about. The weight of that knowledge was almost unbearable. The days following my conversation with David were a blur of cold dread and relentless activity. He had immediately started the formal process, sending the dispute letter to the bank, contacting the police to file the fraud report. Told me to expect pushback, resistance, and a long drawn-out fight. He was not wrong. My instructions from David were clear. Gather every piece of financial documentation I could find that might relate to Sarah or our shared history. Old utility bills, joint account statements. Thankfully, we only had one minor shared account for household expenses. Any paperwork from her supposed business ventures that she had ever mentioned. It felt like I was an investigator, sifting through the wreckage of my past, looking for clues to explain the present disaster. It was during this painful excavation that I started to uncover more, much more. I found an old shoebox in the back of my closet, forgotten, filled with what Sarah had once called important papers. Inside, nestled among old greeting cards and faded photographs of us smiling, were documents that made my blood run cold. There were credit card statements, not in my name, but in hers, with balances I could barely comprehend. Tens of thousands of dollars, far more than her income could ever support. Some of them were from banks I'd never heard of, others from familiar names. There were also notices of overdue payments, final demands, and even a vague reference to a previous small claims court case for unpaid debt. She had been living with this mountain of debt, hiding it from me for years. Then I found it. Collection of documents related to a startup she had been obsessed with about 2 years ago. It was some vague online retail concept, something she spoke about with boundless enthusiasm, but never seemed to get off the ground. The documents included a business plan, full of inflated projections and loan applications, some of which had been denied, but one had been approved. A small business loan for $50,000. Again, in her name only. But what struck me was the collateral listed. Personal guarantee of Alex Miller. And my signature again forged. It was a smaller loan, but the signature was undeniably hers trying to be mine. It was a different bank, a different time, but the same May. My heart sank with each discovery. The $150,000 loan wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. Sarah wasn't just desperate. She was a compulsive liar, a financial black hole. She had been systematically using my name, my trust, as a lifeline for her own irresponsible spending and failed schemes. I remembered arguments we had, vague disagreements about money. I remembered her saying she was tight one month, or that she had to help out a friend, or that she had invested in something really promising. All of it, I now realized, were elaborate covers for her spiraling debt and her repeated acts of fraud. The heartbreak deepened, morphing into a bitter, resentful anger. Every memory of our life together was now tainted, seen through this new, horrifying lens of deceit. I thought about her family, her mother who she constantly said she supported, her brother who always seemed to need money. Had she been funneling money to them? Or was it all for herself? Gambling, shopping, failed investments. Possibilities were endless, each one more infuriating than the last. I sent everything I found to David. He called me immediately after reviewing the documents. Alex, this is crucial. This shows a pattern. It strengthens your case significantly. The previous loan with the forged guarantee is especially damning. It demonstrates intent, a history of this behavior. This isn't a one-off desperate act, it's a deliberate, calculated pattern of fraud. So, what does this mean for Sarah? I asked, the words feeling heavy. Means it's much harder for her to claim ignorance or a momentary lapse of judgment. It makes a criminal conviction far more likely, and it puts the onus squarely on her for the current loan. The bank can't claim you had some prior knowledge or were complicit if here is a history of her defrauding you. I felt a perverse sense of relief. It was terrible to wish ill upon someone I had loved, but the mountain of evidence, the sheer scale of her deception, solidified my resolve. There was no going back. There was no protecting her. She had built this house of cards, and it was now collapsing, taking my reputation with it. The bank, as David predicted, was trying to be difficult. They responded to the dispute letter with a form response, stating they were reviewing the matter, but still expected me to eventually pay. David told me this was standard procedure, them trying to see if I would buckle. Meanwhile, Mark had been radio silent. I hadn't heard from him since our meeting. I wondered if he was trying to fix things internally as he had promised, or if he was just avoiding me, hoping I wouldn't push too hard. The thought of him, my supposed friend, silently hoping I'd just absorb $150,000 in fraudulent debt, filled me with a fresh wave of disgust. Every day brought a new layer of pain, a new revelation of deceit. My trust in people, especially those I cared about, felt utterly shattered. The world no longer seemed a place of straightforward interaction. Instead, it was filled with hidden agendas and veiled betrayals. The heartbreaking truth was that the person I had shared my life with was a stranger, a con artist, and the person I considered a brother had stood by and watched it happen. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a battle for my very perception of reality. The bank's initial response was infuriatingly bureaucratic. Bland letter stating they had received my dispute and were conducting an internal review. It was a classic delay tactic, designed to wear me down, to make me doubt myself. But David was firm. They're hoping you'll give up. Don't. This is where we apply pressure. So we did. David followed up with certified letters demanding specific documents, threatening legal action if they continued to stonewall. He also filed the formal police report, detailing the forgery and the history of Sarah's financial deception. The police assigned a detective, and for the first time it felt like official wheels were turning. The bank's demeanor began to shift. The initial blandness turned into guarded defensiveness. They finally provided copies of the loan documents. Seeing my supposedly forged signature on the actual loan agreement was a jarring experience. It was close, undeniably, but looking at it with a critical eye side by side with genuine examples of my signature, the differences were clear. The flow was off, the pressure inconsistent. It was Sarah's hand trying to mimic mine. The police detective was more interested in the power of attorney document Mark had mentioned. That, he explained, was a critical piece of evidence. If it was forged, it added another layer to the fraud charges against Sarah, and crucially, it would show gross negligence on the bank's part for not properly verifying it. Then, a call from the bank's legal department. Not from Mark, but from a senior lawyer. Her tone was firm, polite, but unmistakably intimidating. She reiterated that the bank had followed all due diligence and that my signature appeared to be valid. She suggested that perhaps I had forgotten about the loan or had a verbal agreement with Sarah to sign on my behalf. The implication was clear. They were trying to pin some responsibility on me to avoid having to absorb a $150,000 loss. Absolutely not, David cut in, his voice sharp and confident on the speakerphone. My client never authorized this loan. His signature was forged. The power of attorney was a fabrication. We have evidence of a pattern of fraudulent behavior by Miss Sarah Thompson. Your bank manager, Mr. Mark Peterson, approved this loan under highly suspicious circumstances, ignoring standard protocol. Your bank is liable. The mention of Mark's name created a momentary silence on the other end of the line. It was clear his name had come up in their internal review. Mr. Peterson is cooperating with our internal investigation, the lawyer finally said, her voice tighter. He asserts that Miss Thompson presented highly convincing documentation and a plausible story. Plausible enough to ignore basic due diligence for a loan of this magnitude. David shot back. Plausible enough to jeopardize a long-standing customer's financial future. This isn't just about a mistake. It's about a systemic failure on your bank's part, facilitated by your manager's actions. We are prepared to take this to court, and we will demand full disclosure of all internal communications regarding this loan, including Mr. Peterson's notes and any disciplinary actions taken against him. Conversation ended without resolution, but the shift was palpable. They knew they had a problem, They knew Mark was a weak link. A few days later, I received a frantic call from Mark. He had clearly been put through the ringer by the bank. "Alex, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "They're going to fire me. They're saying I exercised gross negligence. My career, everything is on the line." I told them everything. About Sarah's story, the fake POA. I even told them I admitted it to you. They want me to sign a statement, saying I followed all procedures and that you must have authorized it verbally or implicitly. "And are you going to sign that, Mark?" I asked, my voice cold. No, of course not. That's a lie. But Alex, they're pressuring me so hard. They're threatening to come after me personally for the loss if I don't cooperate. They said if I stick to the story about the fake POA, they'll say I am a rogue employee and fire me immediately without severance, and potentially pursue legal action. But if I say I believed you authorized it, they might give me a chance to keep my job, or at least leave with a clean record. He wanted me to make a choice. His job, his reputation, versus my truth, my innocence. It was an impossible, sickening dilemma. He was asking me to compromise my case, to take on some of the blame, to let the bank off the hook, all to save his skin. "Mark," I said, my voice heavy, "you know I never authorized this. You know Sarah forged everything. You know you made a mistake. You have to tell them the truth, the whole truth about what happened. If you lie, you are just digging a deeper hole for both of us, and I can't protect you if you lie." His breathing was ragged on the other end. "Alex, please think about it, my family. This job is everything. My life is everything, Mark. And Sarah took it, and you let her. I am sorry, but I can't let you compromise my case to save your job. You have to tell them the truth and face the consequences of your actions, just like Sarah has to face hers. I am fighting for my life here." The line went silent. I could hear his choked breaths. Then he hung up. The weight of the conversation settled on me. It was a heartbreaking moment. Our friendship, once a source of easy camaraderie and trust, was now completely fractured. The bank was a formidable opponent, trying to protect its bottom line and its reputation. Sarah was a phantom, her motive still not fully understood, but her impact devastating. And Mark, caught in the crossfire, was now a casualty of his own poor judgment and her cruel deception. I was surrounded by wreckage, and the fight to clear my name was becoming a lonely, exhausting battle. Mark's desperate call haunted me. The sheer anguish in his voice, the plea for me to sacrifice my own truth for his career, it was a heavy burden. But David had made it clear, I could not waver. Any compromise on my part would only weaken my position and make me vulnerable. A few days later, a formal letter arrived from the bank's legal department, dated in no uncertain terms, that based on their internal review, they believed the loan was valid. They were demanding immediate payment of the defaulted amount, plus late fees and penalties. It was a clear escalation, a show of force. They were daring me to call their bluff. David smiled when I showed him the letter. "Good. This means they're worried. They don't want this to go to court. A public trial means bad press for them, and it means the truth about Mark's negligence comes out in open court. That's why they're pushing you now. They want you to fold." He instructed me to ignore it, and instead, we prepared to file a lawsuit against the bank, claiming negligence and seeking to have the fraudulent loan declared null and void. This was a significant step, signaling that I was not backing down, but the pressure was immense. Debt collectors started calling, their voices aggressive and threatening. My credit score, which had always been excellent, plummeted overnight. I was denied a small personal line of credit I had applied for, just as a backup, and the reason given was high debt-to-income ratio and recent default. My financial future felt like it was being systematically dismantled, brick by brick. Then, something unexpected happened. I got a text message from an unknown number. "Alex, it's Mark. I need to talk. Can we meet?" Away from the bank. My first instinct was to ignore it. What more could he possibly say? But David had always emphasized gathering information. "Hear him out," he advised. "He might have something useful, or he might just be trying to manipulate you again. Either way, it's good to know his current position." I agreed to meet Mark at a quiet coffee shop on the other side of town, away from our usual golf course haunts. He looked terrible. His face was drawn, his eyes bloodshot. He had lost weight. He looked older, defeated. "Thanks for meeting me, Alex," he said, his voice flat. He didn't even try to make small talk. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, my voice devoid of warmth. He looked down at his hands, fiddling with the coffee cup. "They fired me, Alex, last Friday. No severance. My retirement benefits are on hold, pending their internal investigation. They're saying they're going to come after me for gross misconduct." A strange mix of vindication and regret washed over me. I hadn't wanted this for him, but he had made his bed. "I am sorry, Mark," I said, and a part of me truly was. "But you know I had no choice. I had to tell the truth." He nodded, a bitter smile on his face. "I know, and I don't blame you anymore, not really. I blame myself. And Sarah. God, Sarah, she destroyed everything." He paused, taking a long, shaky breath. "But Alex, I want to help you. I can't just stand by. I know I messed up, but I don't want to see you go down too." My guard went up immediately. "Help me how?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "When I was cleaning out my office, I found something. It was in a forgotten file. Something Sarah gave me, an ancillary document to the power of attorney. It looked legitimate, like everything else she presented. But after all this, I took a closer look. And it's not just a fake POA, it's a completely fabricated legal document. A fake investment prospectus for her real estate venture. And it lists all the money was transferred to. Not just one account, but several. And one of them, Alex, one of them is an offshore account, in her brother's name." My blood ran cold. An offshore account. This was far more sophisticated than I had imagined. And her brother, another family member involved. The web of deceit was deeper, wider. "Why would you keep something like that?" I asked, my voice tinged with suspicion. He shrugged, looking truly remorseful. "I don't know. Maybe I hoped it wasn't true. Maybe I was just burying my head in the sand. But now I need to make this right. I need to clear my name too, at least of any complicity in the fraud itself. I was negligent, yes, but I wasn't knowingly involved in her criminal enterprise. This document proves it was all her, and it points to where the money went. It could help you prove the bank was liable too, because they didn't properly vet the source of the investment funds, which were clearly fraudulent." Pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. It was a faded photocopy. On it, alongside the fake prospectus, was a handwritten note from Sarah, discussing the need to diversify the funds quickly and keep everything quiet. The offshore account number and the brother's name were clearly visible. I stared at the document, my mind reeling. This was a game changer. Not just proof of Sarah's elaborate fraud, but evidence that could implicate her brother and show the incredible depth of her planning. And it could prove Mark's original story about the investment prospectus, and that he truly was deceived, even if negligently. "This is huge, Mark," I said, looking up at him. "Why are you giving this to me now?" He met my gaze, a flicker of genuine resolve in his eyes. "Because I've lost everything, Alex. My job, my reputation. And I deserve it, at least for being so stupid. But I don't deserve to be branded a criminal, and neither do you. Sarah needs to pay for what she did, and the bank needs to take responsibility for their part. This is the only way for any of us to get some justice." It was a devastating conversation, a somber exchange between two men whose lives had been upended by one woman's betrayal. The gulf between us remained, carved out by his initial betrayal and my current struggle. But for the first time, it felt like we were on the same side, united against the greater injustice. This information could turn the tide, not just for me, but for Mark too, by showing he was a victim of her sophisticated fraud, albeit a highly negligent one. The fight was about to get even more complex and much more public. With the new evidence from Mark, the case took a sharp turn. David was ecstatic. The fake prospectus, detailing Sarah's plan to funnel the loan money into an offshore account under her brother's name, was a smoking gun. Proved Sarah's malicious intent, her elaborate planning, and provided a clear trail for the missing funds. It also provided a degree of vindication for Mark, showing he had indeed been presented with a complex web of lies, even if he should have seen through them. We immediately submitted the new evidence to the police detective and the bank's legal team. The bank's posture changed from aggressive demands to cautious negotiation. They no longer suggested I had implicitly authorized the loan. Instead, their tone shifted to settlement talks. They wanted to avoid a public trial, and this new evidence made it clear they would look very bad if it went to court. Their star bank manager, now fired, would be a key witness, testifying to their lax approval process and the elaborate fraud that occurred under their watch. The police investigation, too, ramped up significantly. Sarah was brought in for questioning. She initially maintained her innocence, sticking to her story of a legitimate business venture, and that I had verbally agreed to the loan. But when confronted with the forged power of attorney, the second forged loan guarantee, and now the fake prospectus with the offshore account details, her composure began to crack. Then came the formal summons for a court hearing. Not a full trial yet, but a preliminary hearing to determine if there was enough evidence to proceed with criminal charges against Sarah and to rule on the civil case against the bank. I would have to testify. The day of the hearing arrived, heavy with a sense of dread and anticipation. The courtroom was sterile, intimidating. The air buzzed with suppressed tension. Sarah was there, sitting at a table with a public defender. She looked different. Her usual vibrant energy was gone, replaced by a pale, drawn stillness. She avoided my gaze, looking down at her hands, her shoulders slumped. Seeing her there, facing the consequences, was surreal. Part of me felt a flicker of pity, quickly extinguished by the memory of the financial ruin she had tried to inflict upon me. My turn to testify came. I walked to the witness stand, my heart pounding. The oath felt solemn, binding. David, my lawyer, led me through my testimony. I recounted the discovery of the default notice, my immediate disbelief, the confrontation with Mark, and then the painful discovery of Sarah's past debts and the other forged loan guarantee. I explained how my financial life had been shattered. I spoke clearly, calmly, sticking to the facts. Then came the cross-examination. Sarah's public defender, a stern-faced woman tried to poke holes in my story. "Mr. Miller, isn't it true that you and Miss Thompson had a volatile relationship?" she asked, trying to imply I was motivated by bitterness. "Our relationship had its ups and downs, like any couple," I replied, refusing to be drawn into personal attacks. "But that has no bearing on the fact that my signature was forged, and a loan was taken out in my name without my knowledge. And you claim you had no knowledge of Miss Thompson's financial difficulties during your 4-year relationship," she pressed, trying to suggest I was negligent or complicit. "She kept her financial difficulties hidden from me," I stated firmly. "As the evidence clearly shows, she was adept at hiding her debts and her fraudulent activities." The defense lawyer then shifted focus to Mark. "Mr. Miller, isn't it true that your friend Mr. Peterson, the bank manager, approved this loan?" "Yes," I confirmed. "He admitted to me that he did so based on fraudulent documents provided by Miss Thompson, and without properly verifying my authorization." This was the critical point for the bank. The lawyer, a different one from the phone call, looked uncomfortable. They had a separate hearing on their negligence, and my testimony was tying everything together. Then Mark was called. He took the stand, looking even more nervous than I was. He confirmed his identity, his former position at the bank. He then bravely recounted his version of events. He described how Sarah had presented the fake power of attorney, how she had spun the convincing story about the surprise investment, and crucially, how he had failed to properly verify the documents or my consent. He even produced a copy of the fake prospectus with the offshore account details he had given me, testifying that Sarah had given it to him to show the investment details. His testimony was damning for Sarah and deeply damaging for the bank. He admitted his negligence, but he also portrayed himself as a victim of Sarah's sophisticated deception, someone who had been skillfully manipulated. Sarah's lawyer tried to discredit Mark, suggesting he was trying to save his own skin. "Mr. Peterson, isn't it true you only came forward with this document after you were fired by the bank?" "Yes," Mark admitted, his voice steady. "But I realized I had to tell the full truth. I realized I couldn't protect someone who had defrauded both me and my friend, Mr. Miller." The judge listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions. The weight of the evidence, the combined testimony, seemed undeniable. When the hearing concluded, the judge announced a recess before making a decision on whether to proceed with a full trial. I walked out of the courtroom, my body aching with exhaustion, but a sense of cautious optimism stirring within me. This was far from over, but for the first time, it felt like the scales of justice might finally be tipping in my favor. The heartbreak remained, raw and painful, but it was now coupled with a grim determination to see this through to the very end. The days following the preliminary hearing were agonizing. The waiting was the hardest part. Every phone call made my heart jump. My life was suspended, waiting for a judge's decision that would determine my financial future and the fate of Sarah and potentially Mark. Then the call came from David. His voice was calm, but there was an underlying note of triumph. "Alex, the judge has made a ruling. It's good news for you." My breath hitched. "What is it?" The judge ruled that there is substantial evidence of fraud and forgery. Criminal charges against Sarah Thompson for grand theft and multiple counts of forgery will proceed to trial. For your civil case against the bank, the judge ruled that the evidence of the forged signature and the bank's negligence, particularly regarding a power of attorney, is strong enough that the loan is provisionally declared null and void. The bank has been ordered to remove the debt from your credit report and cease all collection efforts. They're being given a window to formally settle before a full civil trial on their negligence begins. But it's clear the judge is leaning in your favor. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so intense it almost buckled my knees. The debt was gone, my credit was cleared. The immediate threat was lifted. I had won. At least, I had won this crucial battle. "And Mark?" I asked, thinking of my former friend. The judge noted his cooperation and the evidence he provided, which helped establish the pattern of fraud. It doesn't absolve him of his professional negligence, and the bank will still pursue their internal disciplinary actions. But it's unlikely he'll face criminal charges himself, given his victim status in Sarah's larger scheme and his full cooperation. It was a bittersweet victory. Sarah's criminal trial began a few months later. I wasn't required to testify again unless she appealed. I chose not to attend, unable to face her again, unable to watch the public spectacle of her downfall. I heard updates from David, who kept in touch with the prosecution. The prosecution presented a compelling case. The forged loan documents, the fake power of attorney, the previous forged loan guarantee, the fabricated investment prospectus with the offshore accounts. Her brother was questioned, and he admitted Sarah had indeed asked him to set up an offshore account, telling him it was for a secret investment and he should keep it quiet. Claimed he didn't know it was fraudulent, but his involvement complicated things for Sarah. Sarah, advised by her public defender, initially tried to maintain her innocence, then shifted to a plea of desperation, arguing she was under extreme financial pressure and had a mental breakdown. She even tried to paint me as uncaring, claiming I never paid attention to her struggles. But the evidence of calculated, repeated fraud was overwhelming. Her tears and pleas felt hollow, manipulative after everything I had uncovered. The jury deliberated for a relatively short time. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts of grand theft and forgery. The sentencing was harsh, but not surprising given the amount and the pattern of fraud. She received a significant prison sentence, with a period of probation afterwards, and was ordered to pay restitution for the full amount of the loan, plus damages. It was a crushing blow for her, the culmination of years of deceit. My phone rang shortly after the verdict was announced. It was Mark. "Alex," he said, his voice quiet. "Did you hear?" "Yes," I replied. "I heard. It's over for her then, and for me, really." His voice was heavy with resignation. "The bank let me go officially. My severance was denied, and I am blacklisted from the industry. My wife, it's been rough, but I just wanted to say thank you for not throwing me under the bus completely, for letting my truth come out, even though it was ugly. I know I screwed up, and I'll have to live with that." "I am sorry, Mark," I said, and I genuinely was. Friendship was irrevocably broken, but at least there was no lingering animosity, just a profound sadness for what had been lost. "I truly am, but you did the right thing in the end. It helped me clear my name." "I hope you can rebuild, Alex," he said. "I really do." "You too, Mark," I replied. We hung up. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the echoes of shattered lives. My name was cleared. The debt was gone. Justice had been served, but the cost was immense. My trust in others was profoundly damaged. The easy innocence I once possessed was gone, replaced by a deep-seated caution. I had won, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, heartbroken, and utterly exhausted. The ordeal had taken everything from me except my name, and even that for a time had been almost stolen. The silence in my life after the verdict was deafening. The phone stopped ringing with calls from lawyers and debt collectors. The court dates ended. The pressure lifted. My credit score slowly began its long climb back from the abyss. On paper, I was free. I had won, but the victory felt hollow, tinged with a profound sadness that settled deep in my bone. The house, once a home filled with shared laughter and quiet moments, now felt too big, too empty. Every corner held a memory, now tainted by the knowledge of Sarah's deceit. Kitchen where I had opened that fateful letter, the living room where we had spent countless evenings, the bedroom where I had once believed in a shared future. All of it was tainted. I felt like a stranger in my own life. I tried to get back to my routine: golf on Saturdays, work during the week, but everything felt different. Every transaction, every interaction was viewed through a new, cynical lens. My natural trust, once abundant and freely given, had been completely eroded. I found myself scrutinizing people, wondering about their hidden motives, their secret lives. It was exhausting. My friendships too felt strained. My golf group, the guys I used to joke around with, now walked on eggshells around me. They knew what had happened with Mark, the bank manager. They knew about Sarah. The unspoken truth hung in the air. If it could happen to Alex, it could happen to anyone. The casual camaraderie was replaced by a polite distance. Mark. I never saw him again after that last phone call. I heard through the grapevine that he and his family had moved away, seeking a fresh start somewhere else. I wished him well, truly. His actions had hurt me, but he had also been a victim of Sarah's sophisticated manipulation. His last act, giving me the crucial evidence, had helped save my life. Even as it ended his career, it was a tragic, complex ending to a friendship that had once seemed unbreakable. And Sarah? She was in prison. Part of me, the old, naive me, still struggled with the reality of the woman I had loved, reduced to a number, serving time for her crimes. The larger part of me, the one hardened by betrayal, knew it was deserved. She had stolen not just money, but my peace of mind, my sense of security, my ability to trust. She had taken a wrecking ball to my financial future and my emotional well-being. The restitution she was ordered to pay would likely never materialize, not in any significant amount. But that was secondary now. The real restitution was the clearing of my name, the removal of the debt. The healing process was slow, arduous. I saw a therapist for a while, trying to process the trauma of the betrayal. They told me that rebuilding trust was a journey, not a destination. That it was okay to feel angry, sad, even numb. That it would take time. I learned to live with the scars. They were invisible, but they were there. Deep hesitation before lending money, a critical eye towards new relationships, a quiet vigilance about my financial accounts. It wasn't paranoia, I told myself, just prudence. A lesson learned the hardest way possible. Sometimes, late at night, I would think back to that Tuesday morning. The flimsy letter on the counter, the perfect, mundane start to a day that shattered everything. How quickly a seemingly stable life could unravel. How easily trust could be exploited. The story wasn't just about a forged signature and a loan. It was about the insidious nature of betrayal from those closest to you. It was about the ripple effect of one person's desperate, dishonest choices. It was about the profound heartbreak of realizing that the love you shared, the friendship you cherished, was built on a foundation of lies. I was rebuilding slowly. My career was steady. My finances were recovering. I even started playing golf again with a new group of guys, careful not to get too close too quickly. The sun still rose. The world still turned. Life went on. But I was not the same Alex Miller who had opened that letter on that Tuesday morning. I was older, wiser, and deeply scarred. The price of that wisdom had been immense, paid in the currency of trust and heartbreak. And the lessons learned, though painful, would forever define the path ahead.